for example, because you said like even the poverty is related to racism, but then also there's going to be the racism in the hiring or the promotional process or whatever. But when I've looked at the stats, for example, if you actually control for like the wealth of families that black women or white women grow up in, black women actually outperform white women in those same circumstances.
Say that again.
So if you control for family wealth, so let's say you're talking about the top 1% as far as wealth. If you like, so a black woman who grows up in a top 1% family and a white woman who grows up in a top 1% family, the black girl actually outperforms the white girl throughout almost all spectrums of wealth.
Right, except that's such a limited.
So even at the bottom 10%, like a white woman in the bottom 10% versus the black woman in the bottom 10%, or at the 20th percentile, 30th percentile, 40th percentile, black women actually outperform white women when you
But they have to get the job, and
but they do. That's why I'm saying they actually do outperform white women.
they don't get the jobs.
They
don't.
But that's what the stats show.
That's, you're telling me a model minority myth, and I would recommend you look up that.
Model minority. I'm not talking about model minority.
There's a woman who just died at Harvard named Deborah Pager, and she's a researcher on that topic. Black skin is equivalent to a felony conviction in terms of your probability of getting a call back, right? When you submit your resume. So you
blacks, but you don't. They don't see your skin color on a resume necessarily.
Oh, they do.
They do?
Oh yeah, they can see a black name. Trust me.
Okay, so
I know.
okay.
I have that experience.
Okay.
My name is Jones Murphy, and just from my name, people tell me they know.
Jones is a black name?
Yes. You don't understand America very well. I understand America a lot better than you do because I'm a black man, and I've been a black man in America for about.
But then why do the stats show this? That the black women, like when you control for family wealth, actually do better than white women.
But what you're saying is
nonsense. But New York, I can show you the stats if you want.
But I can show you the stats. I can show you the stats from Harvard.
We could post it.
Physics at Caltech. Trust me, my understanding of statistics is overwhelmingly greater than yours. I went up to Berkeley. The reason I used to go up to Berkeley in the 90s was to do physics research, relativity and quantum physics research.
Okay, but how do you account for like the New York Times piece, for example, where it actually tracked individuals, I think like 10,000 individuals, white and black, controlled for all these different various aspects, and it showed that black women black men actually do worse than white men when you control for that, but black women do better than white women at those same levels.
But the black women have massively greater long-term unemployment.
But they're still, I mean, they're just doing better. I'm saying when you control for family wealth. I'm not saying overall. Overall, yes, they absolutely make less. But when you control for family wealth, like the wealth circumstances they grew up in, they actually outperform white women.
I'd have to see that study because
I can show you on my phone. Would you like to see?
Makes no sense to me.
I can pull it out if you guys would play.
I can show you on my phone what my study is.
Let me get it out real quick.
No,
here we go.
I think we're getting a little right-wing bullshit.
New York Times?
Oh, I read the New York Times every day, and there's a lot. The New York Times writes a lot of
racist,
prints a lot of right-wing opinion pieces.
Oh, it's
and when you show me data, that data could easily be skewed. I mean, like,
where is it?
Freaking idiots. People have different ways of bringing up data.
Okay, it's not. Is it loading?
So, do you know who Serena Williams is?
Yes, the tennis player.
Yeah, did you hear what happened to Serena when she gave birth? How she almost died because she wasn't listened to as a black woman who was having... This is an issue that's so pervasive with black women.
Race bias and job market dies.
So it talks about her death. I would have to see the specific study. But here we go right here. So no such income gap exists between black and white women raised in similar households.
I'm showing you the specific study.
But I can show you this one right here.
But I'm showing you this one.
What's the study?
Look, listen, get out of my face.
Okay.
Listen.
Oh, I thought you were trying to show me.
No, I'm tired of you. Because I showed you the study.
No, you showed me an article about the death of somebody.
I showed you a paragraph from the study. And you
I'll look it up.
Move on. Move away from me.
All right.
Get the away from me.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the tolerance. Thank you. What's up, guys? Nuance Bro checking in. We're here in San Francisco, California at the Women's March 2019. Let's go talk to people, see what's going on. So you mentioned equal rights and how you guys are fighting for equal rights for what men have and you don't. What are some of those rights that you feel like men have and you don't?
Equal pay and just sexism in like work and like in everyday things, like they're higher chance to get a job, they have higher pay, and just like in school and stuff they're always like, oh, you run like a girl, like that shouldn't be a thing. Girls can run like a girl, like maybe they run faster, like just
do they run faster?
Sometimes yes. Majority of the girls I know are all athletes and they can beat the shit out of guys.
They can beat the male athletes, you think?
Yeah.
How come they don't compete against them?
Because people just don't let them. Like, that's what they're told from when they're like little kids. That's what they're told growing up, that you can't do this, you'll never be as good as them. And they think that's the truth because that's all that they're told.
So if we look at the Olympic record of like the fastest running time, you think like somewhere in the top 10 would be a woman if we take both sexes into account?
I'm not quite sure, but probably.
No, it's not.
No, well,
But when you talked about equal pay, like what are you talking about specifically? Like what's the discrepancy? Like what statistics are you looking at when you get that number?
just stuff off the media, and I don't like.
I mean, in our AP Hug class, we were looking at like pay differences, and as the professions got higher, the pay gap also got higher. For like surgeons, women were drastically paid less compared to men.
Do you feel like they work the exact same hours? They're taking all of that into account?
Yeah, because my friend's mom is a surgeon, and she comes home at like 2 a.m. and gets up at like 6.
But on average, usually they don't tend to work as much as men. When you look at the statistics, men tend to work even when it comes to full-time jobs. Like when we talk about the pay gap, we're talking like 77 cents on the dollar for every dollar a man makes. But that's not even taking into account the same job. It says it takes the median earnings of all men and all women working full-time, and then they just divide. It doesn't talk about, you know, how many hours above full-time you work, like overtime. It doesn't take into account the specific job. So do you think that's important to take into account when we measure these gaps?
Yeah, I do. Like hours.
I have a question. You said that the men work more and that women don't. Can you tell me why?
Why? I'm not saying why. I'm just saying what the facts are, like statistically.
Okay, I was just wondering why.
I mean, you could hypothesize. You could say, well, sometimes women they might have different preferences. So, for example, women are generally viewed as more social, and they care more about people than things compared to men on average. So sometimes men are willing to sacrifice more time with their families to work, whereas women would rather, you know, spend more time with their families than sometimes go an extra hour or two in the workplace. Is there anything you guys disagree with there? Or?
I would disagree.
Sure. How so?
Personally, in my family, my mom works more than my father, and she'll pick up extra days and gets barely any recognition for that. So,
sure, anecdotal examples and exceptions always exist, but do you think on average that men generally work more than women as far as what you've seen in the world?
no.
Anything else you guys like to say?
So you're saying women care more about their like social life, right, and family, and like.
On average, it seems to be the case, yeah.
Okay, so I don't see if that's the case. Why, for example, my mom and probably a bunch of immigrants that come from outside of the country work for their family and not talk about their family at work. They work. My mom, I know for a fact that my mom came into this country, and I'm sure that all of your parents, sorry, Maddie, came here with one purpose, and that purpose was to provide for their family. So why wouldn't they work for their family instead of socializing? So they'd work more.
Yeah, nobody's saying that women don't work for their families, but I'm saying, like, let's say were both of your parents immigrants, both the mom and the dad?
Of course.
So they both came here trying to work and provide for their family, but do you think maybe on average of families coming here that, especially when they have like more traditional gender norms in those countries that they might have come from, that usually even in those countries, the man tends to work more than the woman?
I don't believe so. On
Which country did they come from?
Colombia.
And you don't think in Colombia that men are traditionally more of the workers and women are more of the caretakers?
Well, yeah, but like there's also like my mom, she went to school because my dad didn't, because he dropped out of university, but my mom decided to stay in school. And I know a lot of her friends did the same thing because their husbands wouldn't.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's always anecdotal exceptions, for example, but we're talking like society at large, because we're trying to make societal change, not necessarily individual change all the time. So if we're talking about society, we have to talk about the statistics at large. But is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, well, like you brought up, it seems it's like facts and stuff that men work more and all this stuff. That's what we're trying to change, because there's a lot more women than men these days that want to work. Like men work, they're fine, they have their stuff. Women really don't, but they want it. So that's why we're out here, because like the society has been patriarchal, looking from like ever since like people came from Afro-Eurasia to America and vice versa. Everything's like
it's cross-cultural.
Exactly, everything's always like for the men. And
why do you think that is?
That's just how it's always been. That's how it's been.
But why do you think that is?
Well, and when people were where there were farmers and farmer and hunting and gathering and stuff, men were built more to do like actual manual labor, and so women did other stuff.
So you think it's like this starts out like biological differences, kind of okay.
And then from there, our jobs have changed. So some people are still farmers, but not everyone has to hunt and gather anymore. So it shouldn't be like the same rules as that. Like those rules should not apply now.
And do any of you guys want to major in any sort of STEM field when you grow up, like science, technology, engineering, math?
Yeah,
I want to major in something either science or math, but I haven't decided what.
Because one of the big reasons for the pay gap is because not a lot of women are in STEM fields, which pay a lot higher than more social work, like being a nurse or a teacher, which is predominantly a field dominated by women. And I think it's like 80, at least in the United States, it's like 80% of nurses and teachers are women, whereas over 80%, sometimes even pushing 90% of engineers are men. So if we could actually change that and make women choose more of those professions, we could actually equal out the gender pay difference.
Yeah, not a lot of women are given opportunities, and that's another reason why we're here. And there's a lot of organizations that are like
opportunities. How? What do you mean?
Like you said, it's usually men dominated, and a lot of women, like it's inside the household, not a lot of people know, but there's domestic violence and the man doesn't let the woman out, and that happens way more than is reported. So that's one thing where the husband doesn't let the wife or the father.
Do you think that's the majority of the reason why women aren't entering STEM fields is because of domestic violence situations?
Oh no, that's just one of the factors. There's a lot more, and I'm not aware of all of them, but from what I do know, that's just my opinion. That's one of the factors, but there's definitely more, you're right.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. By the way, guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell for future videos. So I see you have this sign that says, where do I start? So where do we start?
Well, I think I would start with women's rights and respecting our bodies and giving us the choice. But I think that you can go just as far as showing us your tax records and honesty about your financial matters.
The president.
The president. And I mean, that's what I'm objecting to, the president. And all of the just immoral attitudes that he has, challenging all of the presidential policies and the way that the government has been handling. It's pretty appalling.
So would you say like the majority of the reason you're here is in opposition to Trump?
I would say it's half and half.
Half and half. And the other half is women's rights?
For sure. 2 years ago when I came to the first match, it was definitely a reaction to the inauguration. I think that was what motivated a lot of us. But I think that we did succeed greatly in the midterms. We have way more women in Congress. And so we are making some progress. And so I think we need to have a positive outlook toward the future and hoping that not only do we get rid of Trump, at least by 2020, if not before, although Pence is kind of a scary alternative. Pelosi is a great one.
So would you say maybe even a lot of your opposition to Trump would be something like bigotry, racism, things like that?
Totally. A lot of them are personal qualities that he does not have that I think should be had in a president.
Sure. So what are your thoughts on the recent controversy surrounding the Women's March that involves, accusations of bigotry and anti-Semitism and sometimes even anti-LGBTQ associations? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was actually listening to Wasserman being interviewed on CNN this morning.
Yes, she withdrew her support.
She did. And she's marching tomorrow in a different march down in, I think in Florida. I respect it, but I think that we need to stand together right now. And that's more important. And, it's...
Is it more? You saying it's more important than anti-Semitism and racism and things like that?
No, but the march organizers in Washington have spoken against anti-Semitism. It just took them a while to do it, unfortunately.
But they haven't denounced people like Louis Farrakhan, and actually the specific things he said. Tamika Mallory did not denounce those things. She just said, "Well, I don't agree with a lot of them, but will you denounce it?" And she wouldn't denounce it. Isn't that almost kind of similar to when people were asking Donald Trump to denounce people like David Duke, and he was refusing to denounce people like David Duke? Isn't that kind of similar in that instance?
Unfortunately, it is similar, and it is too bad, and it has splintered us, and that's one reason why today isn't as successful as maybe it should be. This particular march is not affiliated with the Washington March, so we're under a different organization.
But yeah, it is too bad because we were being very, very strong, and that has splintered us.
So would you support having those leaders currently who head the National Women's March? Would you support them stepping down?
Totally. I would, yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, thank you. You caught me off guard.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. By the way, guys, I want to give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, ButcherBox. Now, I'm a big believer in consuming things that make you the best version of yourself, so that's high quality foods. And ButcherBox has grass-fed, not just grass-fed beef, but grass-finished beef that they deliver straight to your house. And they also have chicken, they have pork, they have salmon. And I actually reached out to this sponsor personally because I was such a big believer in their product. And you guys know I've never done any sponsorships on this channel, so I'm a big proponent of it. So if you guys want some high quality meat in your life, go to www.butcherbox.com/nuancebro and you can get an exclusive deal for just our viewers. Thank you. So why are we out here today?
I'm out here just to put focus on women's rights and equality for women and everything that entails for our situation that we're in today with our administration, with our government.
And what are some specific issues, like maybe top two?
Well, equal pay obviously is something that I care deeply about, and also a woman's right to choose and access to health care.
And as far as equal pay, like what does that entail? Like what's the issue around that specifically?
So just specifically women being paid for the same work, the same price. So men, we're paid about 20% less. About 20% less.
77 to 80 cents on the dollar.
Right. And so that's a problem because even women who have a graduate degree make less than a man with just a college degree. So that's something that we need to correct.
And is that for the same job, that statistic?
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah, well,
the 77 cents on the dollar, the one that the president, at least President Obama talked about in the past, that was just if you take the median earnings of all men and all women working full time, and then you just divide. It doesn't account for, time over that. It doesn't account for the same job. It doesn't account for seniority or anything like that.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't speak to the specifics. I read a statistic, I read several articles on it, and I don't know the specifics. I'm sorry.
Well, oftentimes you would certainly recognize that men and women generally tend to choose different types of professions.
I think that there's a lot of professions that are stereotypically perceived to be for women and professions that are just perceived to be for men. And I think that could definitely be something that would be helpful for women to earn more money.
Do you think they oftentimes of their own choice, they kind of want to go into those fields, like maybe something like that deals with people, psychology, nursing, teaching?
I think that could be the case, but I also feel like there are women out there who may want to take a job that may stereotypically be a man's job, for instance, construction or something of that nature, and they maybe don't get the same opportunities.
It doesn't seem to be the case because a lot of companies who are, especially in the STEM field, they want to hire more women, but there just isn't the supply to meet the demand in those kind of fields.
I think it has a lot to do with an attitude too, because a lot of women maybe don't go into jobs that are, that tend to be more of a male-dominated area because of just the way that they might be treated or the fear of the way they might be treated in those jobs.
About that as a high school student and somebody who's been part of STEM programs before, I also think it's an age issue because at my school personally, we have at least 3 different organizations that help introduce women into coding, introduce women into STEM work fields, and they do great at our school. I feel like it may be coming from my generation in specific, especially just at my school. I could name hundreds of women at my school who are going into or plan to go into.
Do you think this is more like a relic of the past, like the older generations?
I really think it's changing.
Yeah, we see that actually in the numbers, like women actually under 35 make more than men in that same age category. So they're actually making more than younger men. When it gets older, it seems to actually, the difference might be coming up, but at least at younger ages, they seem to be outperforming. So did you guys attend the march in the past?
This is our first time.
Have you heard about the recent controversy surrounding the march regarding accusations of anti-Semitism and racism and, things against the...
I was just reading into that. I haven't read much about it, but I have read into rumors of anti-Semitism in the organization at Washington under the march.
The national organization, yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I haven't read enough into it to really make my own opinion on it. I should read more into it. I think they should really look into who they're hiring at such a high level organizing this march, because clearly this is for everyone.
Well, it's not hiring; it's actual leaders of the organization: Tamika Mallory, Linda Sarsour, Carmen Perez, and Bob Bland. Even the founder of the Women's March, Teresa Shook, she actually said all those women should step down because they're actually not being inclusive of everybody and, going against people, anti-Semitism, racism, LGBTQ discrimination. So what do you think like those women should step down with their association with people like Louis Farrakhan?
Right. I think they should definitely look into their associations. I obviously would need to educate myself more about them stepping down, but obviously this march is supposed to be for everybody. If they're not here to include everybody, they shouldn't be supporting it.
Anything else you guys like to say?
No, that's good. We're just having a fun time.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I mean, it seems like one of the injustices you're talking about here is what's happening in Palestine.
Absolutely.
Sure. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think that we need to understand that we're all humans, right? And both sides need to stop, and there needs to be awareness of what's happening to the people in Palestine, and that oppression needs to stop today.
Sure. And how do you think that's going to happen? How do you think what would be like a solution to that problem?
There has to be communication on both sides. You cannot just come up with a solution. It's been a history of hostility, and there has to be. I think that only love can overcome darkness. So, if both sides come to communicate and understand each other and see how they can work in a middle ground, I think peace can be reached little by little, but a lot of things need to change. A lot of things need to happen in order for that to happen. But we need to bring awareness to what's happening, to the oppression that is happening to these people. We have Israel is having pools while the Palestinians don't have water. I mean, just a lot of injustices that are happening in Palestine. They have concentration camps there, It's just,
concentration camps? Are you talking about Gaza, like the whole of Gaza is a concentration camp in a sense?
You can see it. I mean, there's
like open air prison, basically.
Yeah.
Sure. So when you talked about how we could solve this potential issue, you said there has to be love on both sides. There has to be communication.
Absolutely.
Do you think that
the humanity, the common humanity?
So do you think that can happen in a place like Gaza when Hamas is the elected body and part of their charter is to actually kill all Jews?
Well, that's where the Palestinians and the Jews have to. The Jews have to stand with the Palestinians. They cannot oppress them and just leave them to.
Sure, but they elected Hamas though. So like, how do you think like the Palestinians get rid of Hamas first and then start the talking, or like how does that work?
I think they have to talk first, and then Hamas will eventually. There has to be education first. There has to be awareness. People have to know that people have to know. To be educated, they have to be educated in order to make correct options, right?
Part of that education,
make decisions.
Part of that education in Gaza, they have children's programs, and then the children's programs, they talk about killing Jews and killing the Israelis, and that's advertised to children in like these puppet shows and things like that. If that's the education they're getting and they're kind of being brainwashed in that sense, wouldn't it make it a lot harder for them to, talk and have a dialogue?
We also have to see what the Israelis are getting, what kind of education the Israelis are getting.
We basically know. I mean, they don't have puppet shows like that saying kill all the Palestinians. They might have leaders that speak to that effect, of course.
But the soldiers are killing the Palestinians.
Sure, I mean, you can
argue they're killing children, they're killing
and
women,
the Palestinians are killing
everybody.
Israelis as well. And
they're both killing each other.
Exactly.
So there has to be education. There has to be love. They have to set apart their differences, and they have to realize that they're both humans. They are born with rights to live, and that they need to cooperate, and they need to be educated, and they need to find that common ground of respect.
And
right?
Sure. And one of the ways this issue actually ties to this march right now is, I'm not sure if you heard about the controversy surrounding the Women's March with the leaders in Washington. They've been accused of things like anti-Semitism specifically. Did you hear about that?
No.
Well, some of the leaders like Tamika Mallory, Linda Sarsour, and Bob Bland, they've been associated with Louis Farrakhan, who's the leader of the Nation of Islam, and he said things like, basically Jews are termites and things like that. And what are your thoughts on that?
It's absolutely wrong. Jews are humans, just like Palestinians are humans, just like we are human, and anybody in the world is human. We need to set aside our differences of gender, of race, of color, skin, history, of background, anything that we think of division. We need to see ourselves as humans. We need to be united as humans. We need to get rid of all the differences, of all the borders that we construct in our society, right? That is the key to love. That is the key to communication. That is the key to making this world a better place.
All right, guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Social media links are in the description down below, as well as merch. And I'll see you next time, bro.